Welcome to the Dad77 podcast. My name is Kerry Briggs. This is my channel. It can be yours too. Just subscribe to it. We are doing a study in Revelation and Revelation of Jesus Christ. We are in chapter 14. Last one was a very long one because I wanted to get completely through chapter 13, which is a long chapter with a lot of information in it, and sorry about going on long and long because I try to keep these at 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and that's what we're going to try and do today. So we are in chapter 14, and we are going to talk about again the 144,000. We saw them in chapter 7. Introduced them in a laborious way of 12,000 here, 12,000 from there, 12,000 from this, and on and on. But it never really explained who they were, what they were, that kind of thing. Other than, or obviously, Israel, parts of Israel. And you can actually say they're the remnant of Israel. Excuse me. So let's read chapter 14 of Revelation, verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, the Lamb was standing on Mount Zion, and with him were the 144, whose name and the name of his Father was written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like a sound of many waters, and like the sound of a loud thunder. And the voice which I heard was like the sound of a harpist playing their harp. And they sang a new song. That's the 144, sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one was able to learn the song except for the 144,000 who were purchased from the earth. These are the ones that did not defile themselves with women, for they were celibate. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from mankind as a first fruits of God and to the Lamb. And no lie was found in their mouth, or some translations will say no guile, same thing. They are blameless. So here we see the 144,000. They're on Mount Zion. Some people like to say this is in heaven, but Mount Zion is noted to be Israel. And the 144,000 are there with the Lamb. And they have the name of the Lamb, Jesus, and the Father on their heads. Much like in chapter 13, the beast, you had the mark of the beast on your hand or your forehead. So a lot of people like to, futurists and dispensationalists will say that we are going to get a mark on the hand and the forehead in the end times, in the tribulation, and we talked about that in the last one. But what from Scripture this sounds like and means more is that one, the Romans, if you were a slave and you tried to escape and then you were found, you were branded on the hand and the forehead. So this was a very well-known practice in that time, as well as and we'll talk about it back in Ezekiel. There was a marking of a remnant before the fall of Jerusalem in 586 BC. So it's not necessarily a literal name on the forehead, and that it is more to the thought. Remember, this is apocalyptic language. I have to look over there. I don't know why. Apocalyptic language, and that in apocalyptic language is usually something that is described, and it is describing something else. So here, what the meaning of that, and a lot of scholars believe this, that you have two camps. You have the ones that believe in the future we will have, and now it's chips under the skin kind of thing. But back when this was written, this was an identification of whose side you were on. Are you on God's side and you have his mark, or are you on the beast side and you have his mark? And I think that is a legit understanding of what is trying to be conveyed here. It is that one, this 144,000 was obviously redeemed because it even says that they were singing a song of redemption. So they were redeemed and purchased from the earth, or as we know, earth can mean land. The same Greek word for both of them, and they're used interchangeably, and it's basically up to the translator which way they use it, because it means the exact same thing. Well, technically, no, it doesn't mean the exact same thing, but it would be much simpler if they would decipher that out, but they don't. So we hear the voice. They have a new song, and it's basically, these are the redeemed ones, and it's Ezekiel 9. We alluded to that. There are 6 angels that have battle axes ready to go against Jerusalem for their sin and idolatry back then in 586 BC. And then there was a 7th angel or man who had an inkhorn, and he was to mark those that were on God's side, that sighed and cried because of the abominations against God by their own people. And they were marked. And then it says that the 6 then were told to go and kill everyone that didn't have the mark on it. Sound familiar? So the same kind of symbolism here as there. We know from historian, or he was kind of a historian, but he was also a Jewish Christian, who Aspasius, who wrote about some of these things. We know that there was a remnant, the early church, the first part of the church, when they were warned when Rome was coming to attack them and siege, they were warned to get out, and they did. 144 left, and were in a place called Pella when the siege took place, and then eventually Jerusalem fell. And it says here in verse 4, says that 144,000 did not defile themselves with women, and they were celibate. And they go wherever the lamb goes. And they were purchased as a first fruit. So almost all scholars do not believe that what this is talking about here is a physical celibacy, where they were literal sexual virgins, but that they were spiritual virgins, and they did not participate in the sexual immorality, and that the rest of the Jewish nation, the Israeli nation, was involved in. And it kind of goes to the point of not just a sexual immorality, but a spiritual immorality. And they did not participate in it. They stayed pure. They believed in Jesus. They followed Jesus. They didn't go the way that the rest of them did. There's a big influence in the church from pagan worship and that of sexual immorality in their spiritual worship. Just thought I'd throw that in there. I don't know why. I did. And it says in the end of verse 4, these are purchased from mankind. Well, all who are gods are purchased from mankind as the first fruits of God and the Lamb. And no lie or was found in their mouths. They were blameless. So, remember when Jesus called Nathanael and he was coming and he said, here is a true Israelite. There is no guile, no lie, no hypocrisy in him. That's what the real Israeli was. But the first fruits of God is an interesting concept here, and we're going to look at it. Oh gosh, I went way down the list here. So let's go back to the defiled with women. There's some things in here that I need to put in that'll make a little bit more sense. It's a symbolic thing that we talked about, defiling themselves with sexual immorality. And remember, and it will come up again, that Jerusalem was actually called Babylon the harlot. And we've identified that. It's gonna come up again. So Babylon, or Jerusalem, is the Babylon the harlot. So when it's saying they didn't defile themselves with women, remember that Paul in 1 Timothy, we'll look at it here, 1 Timothy 4, 1 through 3, but the Spirit explicitly says that in the latter times some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and teaching of demons, by means of the hypocrisy of liars, seared in their own conscience with a branding iron, forbidding marriage and advocating abstaining from foods which God has created to be gratefully shared by those who believe and know the truth. So that whole concept of them being religious or abstaining isn't, and being virgins is here called doctrine of demons by Paul. And so if you look at that and you go, well, this is what Paul is saying, so what then does that really mean? And that's what takes you to the point of saying, well, obviously this has to mean something else, or Paul wouldn't have said that. So that brings you then to a spiritual virginity, or a purity, I guess. So I got to stop getting ahead of myself. So, and they follow the Lamb, meaning they were believers in Christ. They were the 144,000, so they were the Jewish 144 that followed the Lamb, and we'll see that they actually escaped, or we talked about that they escaped before Rome came. But this is an interesting concept here. In the end of verse 4, it says that they are the first fruits of God. And there's some really interesting passages that can indicate who those are. So they give us what they are. Now they are telling us who they are. And if you look at Acts 2:41, Peter's one of his sermons, he did the whole sermon, and at the end 3,000 were saved. And in Acts 2:47, they added daily to the church. Acts 4:4, they added 5,000 to the church. So and then after Stephen was martyred, then the gospel spread out from Jerusalem, because many people, they were scared of the Sanhedrin and Jewish leaders. So they actually fled to other areas, and that pushed the gospel then out into the regions around Jerusalem, and more were added to the people, or to the church. So, and then if you go to James 1:18, James, if you look at the first verse, it's James to the 12 tribes. So who's he writing to? 12 tribes. So he's writing to Israel, and in verse 18 he says this: in the exercise of his Jesus' will, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would be a kind of first fruits among his creatures, the first ones that were saved and believed in Christ. So the 144,000, saying that they are the first fruits, they are then in fact the first converts to Jesus in the church in Jerusalem. Jerusalem's where it started, and it certainly spread out from there. Talk about no lie found in their mouth. Now we're going to go to verse 6, and some people, it's going to go through a bunch of another angel, and you try and find 7 of those, but it actually cuts short at 6. But it's kind of keeping that same theme, that same style with these angels, except there's only 6. And some, if you look at it, the seals, the 7th seal was actually the 7 trumpets, and the 7th trumpet was actually, where we're at now. So the interlude and all that, and then you're going to have the 7 bowls. So there's some who think that, well, this whole part here is the 7th, but nevertheless, we move on. So in verse 6, and I saw another angel flying in mid-heaven with the eternal gospel to preach to those who live on the earth, and to the nations and the tribes and the languages and the people. And he says in a loud voice, fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. So some dispensationalist futurists like to say, see, this is an example. The church is gone, and the gospel is still going to be preached, because there's an angel going to go around with a loudspeaker or whatever, and he's going to preach the gospel. Well, this statement here is a gospel, but it's not the gospel that the church was given. The gospel the church was given was the gospel of Jesus Christ, that he was the Son of God, that he came, he taught, he died, he rose, he ascended to Father, he's coming back. That's the gospel, and that he wants everyone to come to him. That's not to say that this gospel isn't legit, but it kind of points to the fact that it's not the edict that the church was given in sharing the gospel. Better look at my notes, because I'm sure there's more in here. So one group thinks that this will take place kind of like an angel going through and having a big megaphone, and so the gospel's preached after the rapture and the church is gone. But if you look at it, another way to look at it, I guess we'll say, is that this is all the whole earth, because it's talking about nations, tribes, language, people, big group of people, the rest of the world. And well, who's charged with taking the gospel to the world? Jesus's followers, the church. And actually, the word angel, angelos, is means messenger. Well, the church is a messenger. The church is the messenger of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So other camps believe that this is just a depiction of the church and taking the gospel of Jesus Christ to the rest of the world. The ones who want to say that, this is the during the tribulation, the angels flying around and he is proclaiming the gospel. There's no mention of a tribulation here. These are multiple visions that John is having. So I think that pretty much does that. So we're in chapter 14, verse 8. And another angel, a second one, following the one before, said, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. So we're kind of like, it's introduced here, but it's kind of like we know who this is, but yet this is the first mention of Babylon in Revelation. So in order to kind of find out, well, who is this Babylon the Great, and that you got to kind of look ahead because it's talked about more in future chapters. So one comment first, made all nations drink of the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. This is mostly thought to be a spiritual, and it will kind of come up with that. So later in chapter Revelations in 17, verses 15 and 16, we read this: Behold, I come like a thief. Blessed are those who... That's not what I want. Why don't I read the right number? Okay. Well, I can't even read my own writing. It's Revelation 16:19. And it says, the great city, here's that term, the great city, we're going to see that a few times here, was split into three parts, and the city of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered in the sight of God to give her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. So here's another reference to the great city and Babylon. This is the seventh bowl. Let's go back one to Revelations 11. I always say S on the end. It's Revelation 11. And here we have this is the two witnesses, which we've talked about before. And we'll see in verse 8, and their dead bodies, the two witnesses, will lie in the street of the great city, which is spiritually called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. So we know where Jesus was crucified. He was crucified in Jerusalem. And now Jerusalem is likened to Sodom and Egypt. And remember what happened to both of those. But this great city is likened to them, the city of Jerusalem. And we know where it's at because it says where our Lord was crucified. Revelation 17:18. And the woman whom you saw, okay, so there's a woman sitting on the water. She's a prostitute to all the peoples and multitudes and nations and language. She has 10 horns, and the beast. will hate the prostitute and will make her desolate and naked and eat her flesh and will burn her with fire. So the beast is burning her with fire, is destroying this person. And God put in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and giving their kingdom to the beast until the word of God will be fulfilled. And the woman who you saw is the great city. Who's the great city? Well, it's Jerusalem, where the Lord was crucified, which will reign over the kings of the earth. Well, this statement has made a lot of people believe that it's what they're talking about here is Rome. But if you look at that, and we're going to go, so who are the kings of the earth? Remember, earth can also be land. Who's the kings of the land? And people think it's Rome because Rome was ruling that whole area. But if you go to Acts chapter 4, Acts 4, uh, 25 through 28, we have here where Peter even brings in Psalms 2, quote Psalms 2, and it says this: who by the Spirit through the mouth of David your servant said, we are the nation insolent, the people plotting in vain. The kings of the earth took their stand, and the rulers were gathered together against the Lord and against his Christ. That's Psalms 2. For truly in this city they were gathered together against your holy servant Jesus, who was anointed both Herod and Pontius Pilate. So there's your rulers of the earth, or land, along with the Gentiles that were in the city and the people of Israel. This is an indication of the Sanhedrin, who instigated Jesus being crucified, to do whatever your hand and your purpose predestined to occur. So here we have the great city, and we have that it is Jerusalem. And if you put in this with Peter's declaration of the rulers of the land, because we saw, or the kings of the earth, this is the exact same phrase that is used here in Revelation. And remember, Acts was written way before Revelation. So they're using the same words, and Peter tells us who the kings of the earth are. It is Herod, Pontius Pilate, the Gentiles, and the Sanhedrin, who came against Christ and had him crucified. So let's go back now to verse 9, 14:9. Then another angel, a third one, following with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast, his image, and receives his mark on his forehead and his hand, he will drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in its full strength in the cup of his anger, and will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will ascend forever and ever. If they have no rest day and night, those who worship the beast and the image, and those who receive the mark of his name. Here is the perseverance of the saints who keep the commands of God and their faith in Jesus Christ. So this is very interesting because there's several things here. One is the ones who worship the beast and the image. We've talked about the beast being any political entity that comes against Christ, and you receive his mark. We talked about that already. Not necessarily a literal mark. Could it be a literal mark? I believe that there's a lot of duality in Revelations where things that are apocalyptic and imagery that will be duplicated later, maybe in our time. In the full cup of his anger, and a torment will be fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. This is an interesting concept here. So this is a verse that people want to use eternal torment, but because see, look at here, they are tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. The smoke of the torment will rise forever and ever, and they'll have no rest. Let's look at that. So, some like to say that the eternal torment, the hell, and that their smoke will ascend forever and ever. This has been used multiple times in the scriptures of various things, various times, various peoples, various whatever, which we will get to. But let's first look at 2 Thessalonians 1:9. And it says, these people will pay the penalty of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and the glory of his power. So, hell and eternal destruction is away from the Lord, away from God. But what we see here in Revelations 14 is this is taking place in the presence of the Lord in that. So how can that be eternal hell destruction? Because it's in the presence of the Lord. And hell is in the absence of the Lord. Interesting thing to think about. And then the smoke rising forever and ever. If you go to Isaiah 34, verse 5, it says, For my sword has drunk its fill in heaven, and behold, it shall descend for judgment upon Edom, upon the people who I have designated for destruction. And then you go to verse 9 and 10, and it says, its streams will be turned to pitch. That is fire, brimstone, and its earth will be brimstone. We've heard that before. And its land will become a burning pitch. Remember, this is the destruction of Edom. And it will not be extinguished night or day. Its smoke will go up forever, and from generation to generation it will be desolate, and none will pass through it forever and ever. So again, this is apocalyptic language. It's talking about total destruction, not necessarily a eternal event. Edom went out of existence about 2,000 years ago, and the last Edomite family was Herod's, and they weren't burned with fire and brimstone. They were attacked by the Arabians. They were hauled away, and other people took over their land. So it is a indication of God's complete judgment on them. And we all know that everyone pretty much knows Sodom and Gomorrah. And in Sodom and Gomorrah, God brought judgment upon them. And Abraham went out the next day, and he saw the smoke rising like from a great furnace. So the destruction had taken place. The people were gone. But the smoke rising is an indication that their judgment is complete, and that their judgment is shown to everyone. So again, the destruction was over, but the evidence of that Abraham saw. So it's just an interesting concept that one is eternal destruction, eternal torment, eternal all that is away from God, away from Jesus and their glory. But here in Revelations, it says it's in the presence of the Lamb. So this is not hell. This is something else. And then we'll hit verse 13. And I heard a voice from heaven. No, doesn't indicate another angel. If it was an angel, that's 7. And writing, blessed are those who died, who are dead, who died in the Lord from now on. Say yes to the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors and their deeds follow with them. So there are a very small camp that believes, or I guess tries to make this different than obviously. So die from here on, from when this was written. So does that mean the people who died before that don't get these blessings? But it almost everybody believes that this, in fact, meaning from the point of their death on, they'll have the blessing of the Lord in that. We're at 37. I'm going to finish this 17. Well, so 14 through 16. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and sitting on the cloud was one like the Son of Man. Most people believe this is Jesus, who has a golden crown on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. And another angel came out of the temple, calling in a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, put in your sickle and reap, for the hour has come, because the harvest of the earth is ripe. And then he who sat on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. A couple quick points here, and we're going to move right on. Most people believe that this is Jesus, but some say it can't be Jesus because he's getting orders from an angel. Well, the angel comes out of the temple of God. Who's in there? God. So that he is just a messenger of God, from God to Jesus, saying the time is at hand, reap the earth. So he puts in this sickle and he reaps the earth. And then another angel comes out of the temple in the harvest, so that he also had a sharp sickle. And another angel, the one who has power over fire, who comes from out of the altar, and he called in a loud voice to him with the sickle and said, put your sickle in and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, because the grapes are ripe. So the angel swung, and he gathered the cluster of the vine of the earth and threw them into the winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and the blood came out of the winepress up to the horse's bridle, a distance of 1,600 stadia, or your version may say furlong. Stadia is the Greek. So, so we have the reaping of, in the first one, the harvest, for the harvest is ripe, and this is thought to be the the grain harvest, where early in the year the grain is harvested, and you take it to a threshing floor, and you separate. In Matthew 3:12, John says Jesus is coming to clear the threshing floor, and you would throw the wheat up. The chaff is lighter, it would be blown away. The wheat is heavier, it would fall down. When you got it all separated, you put the grain in your barn and you burnt the chaff. And that's what Jesus did with this harvesting of the earth. And then if you look at Matthew 3:10, John says the axe is already at the root of the tree, meaning that this is happening now, not necessarily in the future, but happening now. That once Jesus came on the scene, the harvest began. So then the wine, or the grapes that were harvested and put in the wine press, it comes out blood. So this is an indication of judgment upon the people. The wine, so who is the grapes? Who is the vine? If you go to Isaiah 5:7, it says that Israel is the grape, and Judah is, or Israel is the vine, the grape, and Judah is the plant, meaning the vineyard. So the vineyard is Israel, and Judah is the vine. But because you put that in and it comes out blood, then that's an indication of judgment. And if you go to Isaiah, I do have it. 5:7, for the vineyard of the Lord of armies is the house of Israel. There we are. And the people of Judah his delightful plant. So you can see that that's an indication of who this is that's getting reaped in that. And the 1,600 stadia or furlongs, depending on how you have it in your translation, they mean the same thing. That is the length of the land of Israel from the north to the south, complete from one end to the other. Now, if you took what this is talking about is that the blood coming out as to the horse's bridle, there's not enough room for the amount of people that would take to actually do that. It is apocalyptic language, meaning that this is a bloodbath and a total destruction throughout the whole land of Israel. Wow, I hurried really quick. I still went over my time, but able to get this all in. This is chapter 14, and this is episode 21. If you have any questions, 77thedad77@gmail.com. If you know me personally, text me. Like the channel, share the channel, be the channel.